and people from Red Hat and Adobe are going to turn up. We'll give everyone another minute or two because it's only just 4 o'clock, and then we will start. We got a couple of things on the agenda today. We'll do the usual kind of new people intros, and then I am going to invite Brendan from Red Hat to just give us his thoughts on some of the stuff he's been doing with OpenWhisk, and then Nick is going to be talking about Composer and this new open source tool he's been building, and then there's some stuff around runtimes that came up recently. So I'll give everyone another minute or two because I see some of the familiar faces who should be here aren't, and then we'll kind of get going. So Rob, have you got other OpenWhisk talks lined up?
Only Code Bash so far. Next year. What's the other talks I'm giving? No, I don't think either of the other talks are serverless I'm giving next year. That's it for me this year. Then I've got a training course to do, but that's just APIs.
Cool. I see Carlos is here, and Carlos is now had a nasty accident, I think, or
can you hear me?
Yeah, good. I like it. I agree. That's it. Right. So I expect to see more hats and more costumes in the future.
Well, Carlos, I can call Jack Sparrow. Which pirate are you? what's your pseudonym?
Yeah, something very British, I think. So I'd have to think of something very British for next time.
The significant number of the pirates were British, although they switched between privateering and piracy depending on the season.
So I think it's a good metaphor. I think pirates and serverless, it's swift, it's nimble, never mind these big container ships. Much quicker. Okay, I see more of the familiar faces. I see Dan's getting involved in the party. That's wonderful. Dan's got some kind of hat on. This is good. Lorna, no hat for you. Okay, cool. It looks like we've got a quorum. So I'll begin. So hello and welcome everyone to this bi-weekly OpenWhisk community call where we kind of trying to talk about some of the stuff that has been going on in the community and just kind of build the kind of community out. So I'm wearing a pirate's hat today because Carlos started this trend 2 weeks ago by wearing a kind of pirate outfit, and we think this is a kind of good thing to encourage. So yeah, in the future, more hats and more costumes are definitely encouraged on the call. And I think it's probably mandatory for the moderator to wear one. So just be aware. So we normally start by doing some kind of intros, primarily for the people that are kind of new to the call. So I'll say, just to introduce myself, my name's James Thomas. I work at IBM as a developer advocate in our cloud division. And I've been kind of involved in OpenWhisk for about 2 years, kind of doing the advocacy side of it and presenting and writing the JavaScript library and some of that kind of stuff. And I'm going to be hosting today's call. It should be about an hour. We've got a good amount of content, but we'll see how long it goes. So I'm gonna pick on some people I think are new and make them do intros. So Brendan, do you want to do a quick intro?
Sure. I'm Brendan McAdams. I'm with Red Hat as of September, with my focus being on working on OpenWhisk, improving OpenWhisk. Experience-wise, I'm coming in from Lightbend, which is the vendor behind Akka and Scala, my second time around with them. But I've been involved in Akka since nearly the beginning. I did one of the earliest production deployments of Akka. So a big part of really what I'm here to do is help. That's the best way I have describing things, is I've got a good bit of experience with the technology base and other things that OpenWhisk are built around, trying to bring that to bear to help improve the project. That's what Red Hat has me here for. That's what I intend to do. I've been talking to Roderick and a few other people about bits and pieces to improve. So I'm here. If people need help with Akka, with Scala, questions around those things, feel free to reach out.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I'm just looking at the wall of faces. Timothy Bolt. I don't recognize you, and that doesn't mean you're new, but I don't recognize you. So do you want to give just a quick intro and say hello to everybody?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? So I joined. I work for GE Digital. I'm a principal engineer there. I joined GE in April of this year, and before that, I spent 4 years at Google in cloud storage in the infrastructure team. Currently, I'm working on I'm working on our serverless efforts within the Predix cloud engineering team.
That's great. Thank you very much. Next up, Kalonji, who I know, but I don't think other people know. Kalonji, do you want to just say hello to everyone?
Hey, good morning, everyone. So my name is Kalanji. I'm with IBM's emerging tech team. So I worked with OpenWhisk for a bit, primarily on an Ansible automation script. So essentially how to deploy it at scale. And generally at the moment, I'm mostly like working around like demos for conferences and so on. So primarily around like home automation. So essentially like creating like a Lexus skill. Yeah.
Cool, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak and introduce themselves? If so, you can just start speaking.
Sure. Hi, this is Preeti. I just joined. This is my first call. I've been with IBM from past 2 years, and I've been working on OpenWhisk from past 1 year. I'm primarily working on the OpenWhisk Whisk deploy. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot at me.
Hi, I'm Olivier here. This is also my first call. I'm with IBM Research, and I've been working on OpenWhisk since the beginning of the year, and I'll be talking about Composer with Nick today, the thing I've been working on primarily on OpenWhisk.
Awesome. Anyone else? Should we give you a countdown? 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Cool. Okay. So good to see some new faces on the call. The next thing we normally do just at the beginning is a bit of housekeeping, is ask some of the main developers just to jump in and give us 5 minutes on any notable changes or things that have been happening in a kind of dev stream to keep everyone up to date. So does anyone want to volunteer to just do a kind of 5 minutes or talk about some of the things that they've been working on their kind of platform development?
Maybe I can jump in quickly.
Yep.
One of the things that certainly changed is we introduced batching for activation records, which should improve the performance of writing away a lot of activations, obviously. Another thing that happened was that Vincent actually did a lot of work on replacing CLI-based tests with tests that are based on a REST interface. So that pushes forward the work of moving the CLI out of the main repository and being able to have releases for the CLI and all that good stuff. So that's moving forward pretty well. Tyson and I introduced a log store interface. So we're looking forward to have different integrations for piping your logs wherever you want to. And maybe one notable thing from my side is, did we talk about common? I think Vadim.
Yes, we talked in the last meeting about that.
Ah, yeah, okay. You already introduced it. Okay. So that's all in, and work's going on there as well. And one thing from Dave. Dave, I think you're in yourself somewhere. Is that we switched from Redis to Zookeeper. I think that was a discussion in one of the tech meetings here anyway. And yeah, the persistence of Invoker ID assignment has been switched from Redis to Zookeeper right now. That's all notable things I quickly extracted from the commit list. Feel free to add anything.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the runtimes. I think Java got a small feature that allows you to name the class, but also the method. And I also did some infrastructure work around the Apache repos. I moved all the I don't know if I mentioned it last time, but I finally, I think I'm done moving all the runtimes into individual repos, and each individual repo have their own CI/CD using Travis, and with also integration with Docker Hub, pushing those things. And the runtimes that are in the core repo are mainly as a way of building the local builds and keep the same workflow that we have for this Docker. But in the future, we should look into moving that into Ansible, like Ansible or environment variables, where we can tell the invoker a mix of a runtime might be located in this register or that register, or the name of the image, and so on. So remove some of the hard codes, things that we have. I think that's that. I got that in, and then we'll talk later about the new runtimes I'm working on, Node.js 8 and Answer 4.
Cool, thank you, Carlos. Is there anyone else quickly who has any kind of core development stuff to share before we move on to the agenda items for today? Cool, okay, all right, I guess that's a no. So 3 things, I guess, on the agenda today. The first is probably the shortest, and I thought it'd be good to invite one of our new kind of members of the community, Brendan, just to kind of talk about some of his background and being very deep into Scala and Akka and all that kind of stuff, about maybe what he's been up to with the project and any kind of ideas he have for stuff to surface some of the good work he's been doing at Red Hat. So Brendan, are you okay to give us kind of 5 minutes on some of the stuff that you've been thinking about?
Yeah, I don't know that I have 5 minutes of content. Some of what I said as well. I've been involved in Akka for a long time. So I came on board at Red Hat in the middle of September. A lot of what I've been doing is coming up to speed and poking at little pieces so far. So I've sent up some code as I've been getting things set up on my end. Trying to think here. Early on, I sent, I think it took me a while to get some issues with it resolved, a PR on cleaning up some usage with the Akka code. So a lot of it was just fitting with best practices, moving some things. There's always oddness. We spend all this time in Scala telling people, don't use mutable variables, don't use mutable variables, don't use mutable variables, except with Akka. So it's one of those. In Akka, you're better off with a mutable variable pointing in an immutable structure. So there was some flip around there. What I'm looking at right now, based on a conversation with Roderick, is I'm trying to think how to describe it. It's around the JSON parsing and serialization, deserialization at the low level interfacing with Couch. So that layer between CouchDB and things like the activations, the packages, and everything else. There's a lot there to sort of handle the entity transformation, and some of it is a little boxed into a corner. I only really started looking at that yesterday afternoon, so still unraveling it. But right now it's and this is always the issue, I think, with dealing with the sort of really any kind of entity mapping. At the end of the day, there doesn't end up being a ton of difference between sort of a JSON entity mapping and a straight from a SQL database entity mapping. You're still dealing with this kind of, based on some kind of a record, transform it into an object, take care of things, and then be able to send it back. So that's really where my focus is at the moment. I need to go back. I think I had answered a question or two right as I started. There was work being done on getting the controllers over to Akka clustering, and admittedly, I haven't had a chance to go back and really look at that. But those are also parts of the areas where I want to keep an eye on those. If people have questions or anything else, make sure that I have that to offer. But I don't know. Some of the other, as I said, I just left Lightbend. I'd been there doing consulting and training. Had been at TypeSafe previously, but most people in the Scala community, I think, started to get to know me when I was at MongoDB. So I was at MongoDB from 2010 to 2012. So pretty early on, created the Scala driver for Mongo, and sorry, I don't know, or however else it is, I get mixed reactions to that statement. But as I said, I've been working in Scala a long time. I've seen a lot of stuff at scale. I've seen people create strange and beautiful things. So it's just down to, if I can help, that's what I'm here for. If people have questions, if there's weird code they need to be looked at, stuff they need to dump on someone else's lap, reach out.
Thank you, Brendan.
And I think I'm done rambling.
Yeah,
good.
we can talk. Just first thoughts. It's great that you have that background in Scala. Also, you mentioned training. So some of us, or maybe just me, are new to Scala. It's not a language that I grow with. But maybe we can do something around education. Maybe we can get together and do some videos and record them of how to set up your development environment if you're going to contribute to OpenWhisk, like maybe best practices, or just show one way of like doing debugging or breakpoints or performance tuning. And some of that stuff is Java based, JVM based, but again, that's not also another language that is not that I didn't grow up. Java and Scala, maybe that might be able to create resources to help people to just overcome that. Because sometimes we get contributions for Go or the CLI or JavaScript or Node, and then the other half is writing test cases in Scala using Scala test, and that's where people start crying to a corner because they don't know how to get started, how to set up their development environment. Just a theory out there. I don't know if it's true or not. James is nodding.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. From my standpoint, I know Scala really well, and getting started with the development environment was not the easiest thing. It took me a while of a couple different approaches. So getting tutorials together for that seems reasonable, and training and other things. If you guys have topics that I can help educate people on, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, we can continue the discussion later, but that was just my first thought on, because I've been just setting up my IntelliJ and learning how to do breakpoints, how to write Scala tests, how to use my IDE, and it took me more than I thought that was going to take me.
I think that's a really good suggestion, Carlos. I know a lot of people, who might want to contribute, but then writing Scala tests seems quite. Scala's not always got a great reputation as a beginner language, so I think that's a good idea. Thanks, Brendan. That was really useful. That was really good. Good to have you involved. So the next item on the agenda, and probably the majority of the session today, is going to be by Nick Mitchell, who's going to be talking about a new composer tool for orchestrating OpenWhisk actions that he's been working on that is open source. And Nick's probably got about 20 minutes at most to talk about some of the background to this, and then kind of explain where it's going and all that kind of stuff. So I'll let Nick take over now. Are you there, Nick? Do you need to? Oh yeah, there we go. Cool.
Actually, I'm going to start the presentation and then Nick will take over. So this is Olivier here, so you can see something. I understand. Do you see the slides?
Yeah, I do. So I'll give you've got a maximum of 20 minutes, or I'll make you walk the plank.
Sure. Okay, yes. So what we want to talk about today is something we call Composer, which is about composing IBM Cloud Functions. And this is something that's coming out of a bunch of people here in IBM Research, and we actually introduced that at the last serverless conference in New York. So maybe some people are familiar with that. In theory, they recorded all the presentations there. In theory, it should have been online by now. I haven't seen that, but that's also another source of information. And at the end of the presentation, I have links. So all of this is on GitHub, all of this is open source, and you can get all the info from there. So the goal here for this work is to say, well, we have functions, OpenWhisk actions. and we do things with them, but really to do bigger things, to do more interesting things, we need to compose and orchestrate the execution of many different functions so that functions can remain simple and focused, but at the same time, we can build interesting flows out of these functions. Things like, chatbots, workflows. You have a small list of things here we could possibly do. And what we want to do, of course, is to keep all the good things about serverless in general, OpenWhisk in particular. We want to make it simple, easy, scalable. Polyglot means we don't care about particular languages or runtimes, and all of these good things. And so what I'm going to talk about today is essentially an example, or mostly about an example that we put together for the serverless conference, which shows how we can use this new composer library or composer tool for OpenWhisk to do interesting applications. So this application, you have an example here, is a typical application, right? It's meant to receive SMS and messages and do something with them and reply and answer, right? And so in this particular case, this is a simple app that receives a message and translate it to a different language and respond to translation. And to make it fun, it translates to English if the message is not in English. If it's in English already, it translates to Shakespeare English. So you see that on the left. And what's interesting about this app is it combines different existing services. So like Twilio for handling the messaging parts, IBM services for doing the language detection and the normal language translation, as well as a translation from this fun translation API that is the one about generating old English. And today, what I'm going to talk about is about composing functions. So all of these services have to be exposed as OpenWhisk actions. So they have to be wrapped as OpenWhisk actions. But I think the longer or medium-term goal is to also remove the needs of the wrappers or supports, all kinds of simple ways to do wrapping so that you could really essentially call the services or refer to these services as opposed to having to build actions first that wrap the services that then can be implemented. So as I said earlier, one of the goals here is to make this very, very simple, very, very developer-friendly, developer-oriented. So one good way to do that is to make it easy to visualize an application, the flow of an application. So now I'm showing again a screenshot of a user essentially sending messages, receiving messages from the app, and on the right you have the flow for the application. So this is not how you develop the application really. The way we develop the application is what I write it in, what I'll show in a few slides is by writing code, but this is a representation of the app that we generate, in fact, live. As you're writing the code, you can see the flow you can see the flow of your application being constructed at the same time, and we think it's really useful and really, really powerful. What I really think it's both useful that you have code, ASCII things you can, strong things that you can rely on and edit with whatever editor you like, but at the same time get the benefits of this representation. And so I'm going to illustrate some of the features starting with the illustration itself, and then I'll move to the code. So the first thing to see about this app is that it's indeed a flow, relatively, maybe still a simple flow that fits on the slide, but already starting to be a little bit complex. And I discuss the different aspects of the flow in a minute. But the first thing to see is that this flow is indeed built by composing functions and actions. So the things like language ID here, I'm not sure I have a slide, yeah. The things, language ID on top of the box here is actually a pre-existing OpenWhisk action. In that case, that wraps the Watson, an API call to the Watson translation service. And the flow I'm building here contains both these pre-existing actions as well as piece of code we had, which we call inline functions, and that they don't need to be deployed individually because maybe they don't exist yet, because maybe they do trivial things like this piece of code, and then they can be embedded just as simple piece of code in the composition. Again, this probably will be more clear in a minute. But every one of these blocks is essentially conceptually an OpenWhisk actions. And then we can do things on top of these boxes, like, first of all, this ifs and else here, which is we look at the language returned by the translation from the API that identifies the language. And depending on whether the language is English or not, we're going to branch to two different flows in our application. So that's one of what we call the combinators, essentially the constructs in this kind of language or DSL that let us compose actions. Next example is also a very useful one, is a try-catch, which makes it possible to handle errors. And what's really interesting here with try-catch is it's indeed as a try-catch we know in any kind of modern programming language, where you can describe error conditions across a whole range of your flow. Right here, we're saying no matter what happens in this complex flow, if an error occurs, then let's do something about it. Another interesting thing is data forwarding. So here's also a very typical thing we encounter when we develop these applications. So we want an app that receives a message from a particular phone number and translate the message and then answer the translation back to the phone number. But the APIs we use in the middle to handle the translation, they have nothing to do with phones. They have nothing to do with text messages. So they don't understand a phone number. They would do nothing with them about it. So in fact, when we call these APIs, we want to hide away the phone number. We also don't necessarily want to tell, whatever translation API, the phone number that we've obtained from one of our, users. But eventually, once we're done with the translation, we have to go back and send the message. So that means at that point, we need the phone number again. So one construct we have in Composer is something we call data forwarding that makes it possible to, describe this edge you see on the right here in the picture that says, well, I need a piece of information not to flow through the middle of the app, but to flow around it and get back to my app at the end. That's one of our examples. So I talked about this earlier. We can combine pre-existing functions with actually just code that describes new functions we want to add. And there are lots of examples here. And this is really, really useful a feature because as we start composing things, exactly as in this example, we compose different APIs from different providers. They have different expectations about the way you structure your data, your JSON payloads. And so a lot of the work of combining or composing functions is about doing this impedance mismatch between this guy needs the language name language, that guy needs the language name translate from, right? So we need to write all these completely trivial pieces of code, but we need them to do compositions and to be productive at building compositions. So that's about it for the high-level view of the functions of the the mechanisms we use to construct the applications using Composer, and now you can have a look at the code, and I'll zoom in a minute because I suspect it's probably small. But essentially what we do, so this is all JavaScript for now, although there's no reason, there's no fundamental reason you should be limited to JavaScript. So what we do is we first, we instantiate a Node.js module, which is called Composer, and then we use this Composer module to build our compositions. And it contains things like even more trivial things that I didn't describe, like sequences where we want to say, let's do one thing and then another thing. It does things like, it's if then else, the retain construct that has to do with the data forwarding I described before. You can, existing OpenWhisk actions, we can just refer to them by name, like the Watson language / translator action here, for example. And new actions, we can just inline, JavaScript lambdas to just do the processing. So one interesting feature here to observe as well is, I'm writing this in JavaScript, I'm using this library, I can use all of the good things in JavaScript. So in particular, I can use JavaScript to structure my composition, which is what I've done here. I've realized that the translation box itself, I could build that as a first composition that I could translate, so that's why I have a function translate here. What it does is build this particular piece of the app that is a translation, but then I can embed this into the larger app that is adding to the translation to my, ad hoc way to translate languages that have the capability to receive messages from Twitter and then send back a translation to the user. Right? One thing I should have probably mentioned earlier is that this application that we're developing, this function composition that we're developing, eventually is essentially the same thing as an action. So the way you use it is you have a trigger that will be, the trigger of receiving messages from Twitter, and then you use a rule to connect the application to that trigger. And so the way we build event-driven flows is unchanged compared to what you're used to in OpenWhisk. Okay, so I think in summary for these parts, you've seen that we're building a framework that makes it possible to compose functions and behind functions APIs. In functions already today can be built in any programming language. The composition library itself for now is JavaScript only, which means also that these inline functions, these anonymous functions I had in the middle of the app, today are also limited to JavaScript, which is something that will, I'm sure, eventually change. And one of the big, so the obvious benefit I've described so far about this is that it lets you build this composition, but of course, the dual of that, or the consequence of that, means the framework manages the execution of this application. So if you think of this application, they have states, control state in particular, which is where am I in the execution of my application? What is the next thing to do? How do I handle these branching, these choices, these loops, this error handling? Well, all of that is taken care of once you've described your application using the composition language I've described here. So I mentioned this before, and I think Nick will take over soon to tell you more about the shell. But the way we've designed this experience, I guess, or this developer experience to start with, is based on this idea that developers tend to be, I think, very opinionated. They like particular ways to write code, particular ways to develop, particular editors, whatever. So we don't mess with that. So you can use, so here, for instance, is a screen capture of somebody starting to develop an application using, I think, the Sublime editor. And you can use whatever you want, and then we can connect that to our tooling that will, for instance, as you're writing this piece of code, will synthesize live the shape of the application. We show you that. We'll actually tell you if you have an error in your code and all of these things. But this is not, an Eclipse or IntelliJ-like IDE where you do where you have to go the one way that you're supposed to go. You can develop what, in any way you like, and then the tooling connects to that. The tooling is really a complement to that. So that's essentially described before. And so, Nick, do you want to take over to describe the other capabilities of the tool?
Sure. I guess we can also pause for questions. There's a couple other topics here. One is there's other aspects to the tooling that we're offering just to help with the edit debug cycle. And what is showing on the screen now is some visualizations. We have visualizations of the progress of sessions, of activations, also visualizations of the flow of data and control through that graph. So we can talk about that in more detail if you'd like. We also have a few minutes we'd like to talk about just we've open sourced this tooling. Also, I can just step you into the basic, what the offering is and what it looks like. Maybe I'll do that now just to get.
So you want me to start sharing, or?
Yeah, I'll take over the screen.
Sure.
Well, you got 5 minutes. You got 5 minutes left.
That's perfect. Okay. Does that look good? Okay, so we have so we've open sourced the shell. So the the visualizations and all the command structure for creating applications, for invoking them, for visualizing them, for getting their outputs, for looking at traces, all that kind of stuff is open sourced. It's underneath this project, IBM Function Shell. It's Apache licensed, so you guys can run with it and do with it what you please. We have Travis coverage and CodeCov. Although you can see our CodeCov is still in need of some improvement. We're at 71% right now. The Travis build chain is all set up. You can see that a periodic daily cron is running actually as we speak. The build's complete in actually about 15 minutes. It's four-way parallelized, so it's about 15 minutes you see in this case. For some reason, Travis on the master page reports the total CPU time. But from PR till build success is about 15 minutes. Build coverage is in need of improvement. We'll hopefully get that stuff squared away over the next few weeks. But the development, we can get to this in more detail. We can get to more detail in subsequent calls. But the structure, I think, is pretty amenable for some, I think, pretty flexible extension points. So all the commands of creating applications, invoking them, visualizing them, they're all written as plugins to a basic substrate. So we have some built-in visualizations, as you were seeing, and we have a plugin manager which lets you plug in arbitrary commands. So if you want, for example, register for a particular command resolution, I want it to be whisk activation list, or I want to add a new command, whisk activation foo. You can put an extension point there so that your whisk activation foo command will resolve and you implement what you want to do with it. All that stuff is open sourced and it works pretty flexibly. You can get into more detail on that subsequently. I just wanted to give you a rough picture of it, that this is not meant to be a sort of a one-off kind of just for Composer. It actually can host all the whisk commands and some visualizations for activations in addition to the application and Composer visualizations. It's pretty flexible. But anyway, I just wanted to get that on your radar, that the code is out there now, and we're eager, for help and contributions on any front.
So if people want to get the projects and have a play around with OpenWhisk, it's on GitHub at IBM Functions /shell. Is that right?
That's right.
And there's an NPM module as well. You should.
Yes.
Maybe I can show just the last slide.
Yeah.
Right. So for both the Composer and the shell, there's also, if you just don't want to develop it, you just want to consume it, you can do that as well. And so there's an NPM for the shell, which is sort of an entry point. If you want to be a consumer of it, for example, you just want to create applications and visualize them, the shell is a good entry point to that. The shell can be used purely from the terminal. You don't need to use any of the graphics if you don't want to. You can just use the command structure as you would WSK. There's also, if you want to be a Composer developer, you don't care about the shell at all, that's fine. We have an NPM for that and a GitHub repo for that as well. And so this is the IBM function /composer, and the same for GitHub. NPM and GitHub, the same structure for both. If you just want to be a Composer developer, you don't care at all about any of the command and shell integrations, that's also cool. And you can hook in at this level, the Composer level. Flipping back to the source code, the extension points for the Composer at the shell level are all open sourced. So at this level, you'll see Composer. This is the module for the shell that implements all the commands that talks to the low-level API of the Composer. If you want to write your own layers on top of that, you're good. Okay, I'm done.
Cool. Thank you. Just in time, you get to stay on the ship. Okay, cool. So thanks for that, Nick and Olivier. That was hugely useful for me and some others who maybe heard about the tool I hadn't really dug into it. So I think it's really interesting. You know, speaking to developers, a lot orchestration of functions is a huge topic for those who are kind of doing deep service development. So yeah, it's going to be a very busy space.
So just one point to finish. There are YouTube videos. You can ping me or Nick about getting these demos, and again, hopefully the longer presentation will be on YouTube pretty soon.
Awesome, yeah, and we'll drop all the links in the notes so people can get access to them.
One quick comment, and this come up sometimes in the forums or the Slack in the past, is like people asking, maybe they're coming from a background of building backends with states and sessions. So our typical answer before Composer was like, use memcache at Redis, right? Keep your function stateless. Just wanted to point out that this Composer function, the actions and the functions, you keep stateless, right? We follow that practice. We have that paradigm. Composer is the one that will give you the state and the session management of the orchestration, and that's what you will say do the session. I think it uses Redis as under the hood.
Yes.
I want to make clear that you don't have to rewrite your functions that are stateless, that are your components, individual components. They're not mutable, right? They keep them immutable. So that's a short point on that.
Yeah. So another way to put it is that you get multiple functions being invoked as part of one invocation of your application, and you don't have to manage the state that goes across this function. This is done for you. Now, if you want to have state that persists across activation of a single application, or across activation of an application, as of today with actions, then you have to worry about maybe how to persist the state over time. But inside one invocation of the application, the state management is automated using Redis. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and yeah, people can grab the links and hopefully go and have a play and get involved and give you feedback. So thank you for presenting. That was really, really good. So the final thing on the agenda today is some of the work Carlos has been doing or started around some of the new runtimes for Node with Node 8, and then obviously Swift 4. We've got some open issues for kind of discussing with people. So we've got about 10 minutes maximum, Carlos. So do you want to kind of give it a quick overview of what we've been up to, and then I can talk about some of the things I was thinking, and give a little bit of time for people. But yeah, we've got 10 minutes really before we have to finish.
Do you want me to cover Node.js, Node.js 8 and Swift 4, or?
Yeah. Oh, you can. Oh, I mean, I can. I mean, would you like? Yeah, you can. You do it.
Let's do. I'll do Swift. Let me show Node.js 8.
Okay.
So for Node.js 8, I think I'm not sharing my screen. 1 second. Am I sharing now?
Yeah. Now I can see.
So one of the benefits of moving the I cannot see with this thing. I can get it out. Moving the repos to the moving the runtimes to the own repo is that now we have the ability of segregating and moving, I think, faster because they're kind of like user land extensions. Our runtimes are not core, but they're important, right? Because they implement the API. So I started working with the Node.js 8, and one of the interesting things that Node.js 8 adds is async and await. But let me show you what I have here in my pull request. So I opened an issue with a lot of things that I wanted to do for Node.js 8, but the basic implementation that I have here is that I'm using a package.json to describe the NPM packages that will help maintainers keep track of the NPM packages. Right now, I'm starting with a minimal set of packages, just OpenWhisk, and then the 2 ones for the proxy. It has under the directory structure. One thing that I'm doing is putting kind of a change log so we can know how these things get updated. What's the other thing I did? Modify the Gradle, Travis, CIC. I basically piggyback on what I did for Node.js 6. So adding a new version of the runtime is very easy and to maintain it. So that's for that. A demo on, or maybe show you what are the things that Node.js give us is something like this. I don't know if you can see my screen, but this is something that you can run natively in Node.js now, which is async and await, and also there's a Prometheus. I'm gonna pronounce that. Prometheusify a function. So this is a kind of a typical, and it works out of the box. I didn't have to change the proxy or the epilogue. So you would declare a function call with the async key in your function main, and then you're able to do things like await. So you will call a function that is a promise, but already prometheusify that function over here. So that thing will not exit or will throw an error, and then you will do a try catch. So there's no then, as you can see. So after your this thing is done, then you can return the answer. So this is kind of a little bit of different in a sense that some people are used to writing sync code. But I'm going to show you. I'm working also in a IBM version of this Node.js 8, which has all the packages. So you can give it a try. It's published under, I don't know if this is too small. Let me see. So I have an image out there that it will become a new kind in IBM Functions. But it's open source and it's in Docker Hub. So you can do this in your local computer right now. So I already did this, create an action with async await.js. And then basically we can execute this and it works the same way as we work today. It's just to have all the Node.js benefits. And I think that's one of the benefits of Node.js 8. And it has a new V8, and there might be other utilities around URL and parsing URLs. I think that's what I have for Node.js 8. That was like out of the box. The one for IBM Functions, we're doing an image because we need to include some NPM packages that are important for some of our customers, like DB2, like DashDB, and the latest Watson. And then cloud object storage. So I have demos and things like that to do that. And then with async and await, it looks nice. I want to add something to Node.js 8. I don't know what other things may be benefiting from Node.js 8.
I think the async await stuff is amazing. It makes it so much easier when you're kind of chaining promises and errors. So it's a great feature, and it will be ahead. OpenWhisk will be ahead of the other serverless platforms in getting Node 8 out. So it's really cool. So I'm very excited for that, and it makes it a lot easier for people not used to JS development, I think. So yeah, that's awesome. Do you want to talk for a minute or two about the Swift, the codable stuff in Swift? Because that's another huge and really exciting change, and making OpenWhisk actions in Swift so much better, because the JSON handling has been pretty rough with all static languages. So there's this new feature in Swift 4 called Codable that allows you to translate between structs and JSON very, very quickly with minimal boilerplate. Yeah.
So I started literally like a day and a half on Swift 4. With help from someone from the Kitora team, we were able to get Swift 4 compiled and working. I have a pull request that this will give you, again, the same directory structure on these things. Let me see if I can show something here. Same directory structure for the repo. So I have a branch for the pull request. We have Swift 4, and then it has the code in there. It's using the Swift 4 runtime, and it's using the compiler. one of the things to mention that I learned was there's a new syntax for the package .swift. So that's something that I updated, needed to update. And also this comment at the top tells the SPM to use Swift 4. And yeah, and this worked out of the box. I was able to do something like this. Because of time, I will not show it, but actually, I can open a environment and just do it. So let's see if this works. I don't have the file in this folder, but anyway, this is, you created the same way as before. So dictionary in, dictionary out. It would do Swift 4, and then you compile it and you run it. Then packaging and compiling is these steps, which there's a issue that James added, that he has a package that makes that super easy now. And the other thing is I created different issues. So one issue is to have that core support, and another one is Codable. This is the one I think you wanted to talk to. So the idea is that the user can write, I don't know if you can see this, a function like this. That's what they're used today. What we're looking into is have the ability also to have your main function take a input as a codable, and then you will have a function that you put the output. Basically, you respond with a codable and error. Also, I'm looking into maybe responding just with a codable straight away if you have static data. But this one looks like it's a pattern for async functions that you will usually be calling a database or another API and passing this function down so you can get the result. So in terms of some magic that we have to do, which Ricardo from IBM, from the Cultura team, from the open source project, is helping me out, is that you don't have to do anything. I want to make the user experience very simple, that if you have a hello.swift and it's kind Swift 4, if you write your function this way, it would work. If you write your function this way, based on the signature of your main function, it would know to do it, to handle the codable. So everything should work out of the box. So there's no breaking API. I think James was concerned about that. So I broke the issues in terms of initial support, having codable, and then what do I call this one? I think we should get in, James, the package to make it easier to compile, because it's a pain. And then the last one, very quickly, is Swift 4 web proxy. The thing is that this runtime uses Python, and under the hood, what it's doing is executing a binary of the Swift and passing the JSON as a string in standard input, and expecting the last line as a string of JSON output. You don't see that as a Swift coder, but that's what the epilogue does. The thing is, if you execute that function again and you read a file, or you cache some data, or you initialize some objects, you have to spend time doing that all over again. Like the runtime have to do that over again. In Python and Node.js, we have the benefit that the web proxy is in the same language, so we can hold that in memory. So one thing that I want to do some investigation is to have a web proxy instead of Python, have it in Swift. That way, if you call it, you call your function once, and then you call it again. The second time, the third time, if you did some work to read a local file or get a model to process some data or a message, or that information that you don't have to do it again, it's in memory, and your functions will be faster in terms of latency. I think that's it, just short on time. James?
That's brilliant. I think it's really pertinent stuff, especially with Swift. I was said, when I was at SwiftConf in Europe a couple of months ago, people were asking about codable support. I think, the feedback I'm sure we've all had is that the way that we write Swift action today doesn't always feel very Swifty. So I think this will be a huge improvement as the language has enabled us to do this. So yeah, thanks to Carlos for starting this work and creating all those issues. So people can go, if you're interested in either those two runtimes, and comment. And yeah, with breaking the runtimes out of the core repo, it's going to enable us to move a lot quicker, which is awesome. So Yeah, thank you, Carlos. That's good work. Yeah, and if anyone has any comments, because we don't really have time today, just jump on GitHub or the mailing list, and we can kind of talk about this stuff. So thank you, everyone who's been kind of talking today. The last thing to cover is to find a willing volunteer to be the next moderator. Potentially, hopefully someone who's not done it before. I think that would be good. And I'm going to throw a couple of names out there as I'm in charge. Rob, you're looking like you want to volunteer to host.
I would love to, but I'm training in Bath that day. Sorry.
Good excuse. All right. Let's ask the audience. Does anyone want to volunteer for the wonderful task of hosting it'll be 2 weeks today. Is anyone has a burning desire to be the moderator in 2 weeks' time? Don't rush at once. Okay.
The Wednesday before Thanksgiving in the US.
Oh, is that, are people out then? Sometimes.
Yeah, it tends to be not a very busy day.
Yeah, I mean, that whole week, depending on companies, but in the US, you could have as much as that whole week of Thanksgiving be kind of questionable. Certainly Wednesday and Friday.
Yeah, we can skip an instance and go right to December, and then see if Rob is still on the table then.
Good suggestion.
We can move it to the 29, or we can have a turkey extravaganza OpenWhisk, and we show demos. Somebody come up with a good demo to show, or I don't know.
I mean, I think it's up to the community. I don't think it's too much of a problem to skip one, as I don't think
I'd vote to skip.
Yeah, unless anyone's desperate to. If anyone's desperate to host it, they're more than welcome to. But I think skipping.
Let's skip it. Okay. Make it the 29 instead of the 6, maybe.
Let me look at my calendar. 29. I mean, yeah, we can do. Was that Rob? Are you still training on the 29th?
God, I hope not. That'd be an awful long training session.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 29 doesn't look too bad at the moment.
Okay. Okay, we'll put you down as provisional then, and if you find you can't do it, let us know. It's very easy for everyone. All you have to do is send reminders out repeatedly to everybody, and then try and gather some kind of an agenda thing, and then you just run through the agenda. Matt has very kindly offered to let us use his Zoom for this, so that's kind of it really. But let's go for let's put provisional date of the 29th, and Rob will be the captain of your ship that day.
Yeah, I'm really going with that whole thing.
Yeah, you need to. It's mandatory. It's mandatory.
You have 3 weeks to get a hat or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's Halloween time, right? So there's loads of costume stuff going cheap now. So get down, and we'll, it's quite comfortable, this hat. I quite like it. Right. Okay, we're almost at the top of the hour. So is anything else to say in the next 2 minutes? Otherwise, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned.
Thanks,
Good.
James.
Silence. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Have a good rest of your day, rest of your week, whatever it is, wherever you are. And see you soon.